Ever heard of this term while reading your literature or research papers? Anyone? Okay. What is a review? What is your understanding of a review? Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay. So in this lecture, I'll be just briefly touching upon what are systematic reviews, very briefly. Because it's a subject in its own manner. And with systematic reviews, we generally also get to know about meta-analysis. So it will be a short lecture. Mm, but in research methodology, it's important to know this kind of research design also. It's basically a kind of research design, but it is very different from the other kind of research designs in that we are not normally dealing with subjects or data, but we are actually, reading what has already been published regarding a particular topic in an area, and then we gather all the evidence related to that and then try to, so it's like a meta analysis, and then try to understand or then try to tease out the most pertinent and the most common information from all these research papers which have been written on a particular topic. So that is what a systematic review is. It's a study of studies. It always attempts at collecting existing evidence on a specific topic in order to understand a specific research question. So, for example, they are usually most common in medical sciences, in that, in the field of medicine and health, evidence is rapidly growing, and it can be very overwhelming for researchers and for physicians and for doctors also to keep pace with the increasing developments in this domain. And that is why, researchers sometimes do a systematic review of certain treatments or certain randomized control trials in which a particular treatment was given to a group of patients, and then try to understand what the overall evidence says about the efficacy of a drug or efficacy of a intervention in order to solve a particular problem. So that is how systematic review come into picture. And because they are study of different studies, obviously the evidence that you get from systematic reviews are always more robust as compared to the single studies that you will read. So if you ever do some kind of study, and I would always suggest that before going to single research papers, always try to Google or try to understand whether a systematic review has already been written in the area in which you are investigating, because chances are that it will lead you to the relevant papers for your work. And because there is practically no limit to the number of papers which are written in a particular area, that is why we have to narrow down the criteria for the selection of these studies. And obviously we have to formulate a very tight and precise research question and specify the criteria for which we will include a particular research paper or exclude a particular research paper from our overall analysis. And but the one thing that should be always remember is that with all the kind of research that we do, we have to clearly state the objectives and the methodology. So again, when we do a systematic review, before doing that, we have to create a research protocol. In that research protocol, we have to specify each and every step that a researcher or we will observe while proceeding towards conducting a systematic review. So it's basically the synthesis of studies findings, but in a systematic way. And why we call it systematic is that we already specify in the research protocol what kind of information we will be extracting from the papers that we accumulate for the research work, and that makes it systematic. The other aspect or the other uh, type of review, it's called a scoping review, which is not very systematic as compared to the systematic review, but it is generally done in area where there is relatively lesser knowledge. The field is new, and not many researchers have done a particular work in that kind of area. So in that kind of area, generally researchers do scoping review to understand what is actually happening. So there are two kinds of reviews: systematic reviews and scoping reviews. Systematic reviews are always more reliable and robust than scoping reviews, but scoping reviews have their own advantages. When the research is quite heterogeneous and not very well formed, and we are still learning the concepts of that particular area in the research, then scoping review is the way to go. And generally, it is always better to first learn how to do a scoping review, then go to systematic review, because a lot of things become clear to you when you do scoping review, and then systematic review relatively becomes more easy. So, first, even before we discuss about the steps to do a systematic review, we should be clear that why do we want to do a systematic review. Now, as I said, if you want to synthesize and understand the overall evidence that exists in a particular research problem. For example, if I'm trying to understand what is the impact of drinking coffee 2 times a day on the cardiovascular health of a person. Now, definitely there have been multiple research papers that have been written on coffee consumption or caffeine consumption, and they have tried to link the overall health of the person. Even among all these research papers, I'm only interested in those which talk about the cardiovascular health of the people. So then I'll probably selecting only those kind of research papers, so that from the total assessment of these research papers, I can finally understand where coffee really stands when it comes to its impact on the overall health of the person or the cardiovascular health of the person. Another reason is that there is a lot of ambiguity also in research. For the same kind of research, sometimes the context will differ, sometimes the population will differ, sometimes the research questions will differ, even though the research question broadly answers the same research area. And again, to make sense of all this ambiguity and heterogeneity in the research works, we do systematic review. So as I mentioned, it is generally more prominent in medical and health science domains, but it is also quite common, I think, in psychology also. I've not yet heard of any systematic review in computer science, but I think when it comes to using artificial intelligence and machine learning to solve certain problems, there must be some systematic reviews. So before we do a systematic review, we have to identify a precise problem statement. And using this framework, which is called the PICO framework, so we have to identify what kind of patients or the population we will be investigating, what kind of intervention we are focusing on, and how are we comparing the intervention with the other. So mostly when we are testing for a drug, the comparison is the placebo. So when we do a systematic review, we are generally comparing it. So we have to specify a comparator and the outcome. So what exactly is the health outcome that we will be comparing in the different populations of patients that we will be studying. So that all of you are familiar with development of research protocol hopefully by this time, and I'm sure the comments would have helped you to understand much better what a research protocol is. So never do a systematic review without developing a research protocol. You always have to develop a research protocol. Then you have to conduct your literature search. You have to select your study as per the research protocol. So in the research protocol, you will always mention on what basis the literature will be searched. That comes into inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria. Then you will be appraising the studies as per the protocol. So when you are exploring all the research papers finally for the systematic review, you have to make a data extraction form as to what kind of information you will be extracting from each research paper. I will show you a sample of a systematic review after the lecture. You have to extract data from each research paper, you have to analyze the results, interpret the results. In the research protocol, you have to write a very clear search strategy. Like you remember how we discussed the searching strategy on IEEE or Web of Science using or, and synonyms and everything that relates to a particular area. That is called as a search strategy. So you have to specify a clear search strategy. To develop a clear inclusion and exclusion criteria, on what basis you will include and exclude their studies, how will you screen the collected papers that you obtain from your literature search. So for example, generally when you do a literature search in your research protocol, you will specify at least 5 to 6 websites from which you will obtain your research papers. It could be IEEE Explore, Web of Science, Scopus, a Sage, or maybe Elsevier website. So you have already to specify these frameworks for which you will be extracting your research papers. And after you have obtained all the papers, so generally, because it's a normal query search, you will have lots and lots of papers. It can go beyond 500 and 600 papers. Now you have to screen them. So you have to talk about how you will screen them. First level screening is always title screening. If you feel title is not relevant to your work, you discard them. Second level screening, so for example, at first level you had 500 research papers. After title level screening, you are left with 200 research papers. For these 200 research papers, you will do abstract screening. You read the abstract of each of these papers, and that is why abstract clarity is so important, because it tells you about what is happening in the paper. And after that, then you are left with 100 papers, and after title screening, abstract screening, then you will have to go through these 100 papers. Generally, systematic review is done in a group, so there are two reviewers, because if sometimes there is a conflict between which paper to include and which paper to exclude, they can arrive after discussion at a consensus. Otherwise, if a single reviewer is there, then there are high chances of bias. So that is why all these kind of reviews are always done in a team, and there is never one reviewer, there is always two reviewers. And if the reviewers are more, then it will become more complicated, but it's always advisable to have more than one reviewer to be able to establish the authenticity and efficacy of the results of the systematic review. And after adding research protocol, I hope you all know that research protocol is basically a blueprint of what is going to happen in your research when you actually conduct it, or when someone else conducts it, when he or she has your research protocol. So naturally, your research protocol has to have a data extraction form, which says what kind of data you will be extracting after reading or during reading the research papers. So this is an example of an exclusion or inclusion strategy. The example that I will be showing is that I did a scoping review, and it's almost similar to a systematic review, but for the demonstration sake, I will be using this example. So if I wanted to understand how the distance between the schools and the nearest fast food restaurant affects the BMI or dietary habit of children. So that was the research question I was exploring. And so then I had to specify that the children in the study, whichever study I include, have to be between 4 to 18 years old. Now, most studies will not specify the age. They might specify the class in which the students are studying. For that, I have to have a proxy indicator for their age. So then the next criteria was that if the age is not mentioned, the school type or the class grade was used as a proxy indicator for age. The third criteria was that any research paper that I come across has to show me how it is directly or indirectly measuring the distance of fast food outlets to the schools and the relationship between obesity and overweight in children. That those papers have to talk about this. And because I was interested in food environment around school, so any research paper which does not describe the food environment around school, or it just says a convenience shop, it will not come into my research paper. I have to know what exactly that shop is selling so that I can include it in the research paper. And the paper has to talk about the proximity of these outlets to the schools. There were some research papers which were talking about fast food outlets around school, but they had not specified the distance measure. So if that distance measure I could not find, I have to exclude that research paper. And qualitative studies and those written in different language to English were not included. So this is a sample inclusion and exclusion strategy. And after today's class, you go to Cochrane Reviews. So Cochrane Reviews is the website that I had shown you last time also, and try to search for any systematic review. Go to that papers or systematic reviews, inclusion and exclusion criteria. you will be able to see clearly how they have decided to include the papers. This is what a data extraction form might look like when you write it in your research paper. The title and reference of the paper, the year in which it was published, the country of the study. Now, the country of the study is important because sometimes context plays a very important role and very significant role in the research and the results of the study. Sometimes what happens in USA and might apply to that context may not apply to India. And that is why even when you're writing your literature review, I think in some of the papers I had made this comment that what was the population or who were these people on which this research was done. That is always important to know before we generalize the findings of any research. Then because this research related to school going students, I wanted to know the students' age or grade, class, and type of school, and food outlets that were used to characterize the food environment around schools, the distance that was specified to measure proximity, the health outcomes used in the study. Most of the research papers talked about food outlets and distance, but they were not talking about BMI. But because my question related to BMI, so if the papers were not talking about BMI, I had to exclude those forms. And those included in that, I would include how they were measuring the BMI. Now, BMI was also measured in very, very different manners in different studies, and that all was also captured in the data extraction form. Then again is the research question that each paper was answering. Even though these final selected papers were trying to answer the similar question, I wanted to know precisely what research question they were asking and how differently these questions were from the questions in the other research papers, even though they related to the same domain. And what was the finding? This was important. So, for example, if I had 25 research papers finally to review, then I would get 25 results from these research papers, and then I will synthesize the results of these 25 findings and then try to assimilate what exactly it means in the overall scheme of the research. So that is what a systematic review does. Now for systematic reviews, there are certain frameworks that have been specified. This is the Cochrane Handbook for Systematic Reviews. I hope you remember this website also. So this is where you will find all the answers for your systematic reviews, and you can actually access this handbook for systematic reviews and interventions. So this is where you will submit your research protocol when you are doing a systematic review. Cochrane is the center which manages systematic review on most of the topics that are conducted in the entire world. So if you ever have to search for any kind of systematic review, you just go to cochrane.org. And here you can search for systematic reviews. Let me just try. So it has the database of systematic reviews, and it's from England. So here you can always search the review. Some of you worked on medical problems in your research protocol. So if you are interested in systematic reviews on your particular topics, you can always go to this website to identify. So this is how it will come. You can also do the advanced search here to search for the systematic reviews. You can see that there are around 8.5 thousand reviews, then 2.4 protocols. That means the protocols have already been submitted, but they are still going the systematic review. And systematic review takes time. It takes around 1 to 2 years to finish a systematic review alone, and that is why it's a fantastic thing to do in your thesis or dissertation project. Because when you do a standalone project in your thesis, you know you will learn something, but you will learn a great deal, especially if you want to do PhD later on. I think I strongly would advise you to do a systematic review in your master's dissertation. Then there are some reporting guidelines for systematic review. So when systematic reviews are completed and you are about to publish your findings, then there is a particular framework which you have to follow so that you can submit the paper for the publication. So there is something called as Prisma flow diagram also. It will take some time to open. So Prisma basically stands for preferred reporting items for systematic review. So when you are doing a systematic review, there are certain items that they want to see when you're reporting your findings in the research papers, and it's usually a 50 to 60 page research paper. And these guidelines are very, very important when you are about to conduct your systematic review. I'll show it when it opens. Okay. So far, is it clear to you? Do you have a brief idea of what a systematic review is?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. Then this is another research paper that you can read before conducting a systematic review. This is the Joanna Boris Institute Manual for Evidence Synthesis. This talks about the scoping review. And just like Cochrane.org is the master in systematic reviews, JBI, Joanna Briggs Institute, is the place you would want to go if you want to know more about scoping reviews. And so basically, systematic review, scoping review, meta analysis are the methods for doing evidence synthesis. You're basically synthesizing the evidence that exists in a particular field by reading research papers in a particular field. So here you can actually see. So it's a good manual to go through to understand in detail about lot of things, and it is freely available. So this is something that I had consulted and had really found it useful. But at the end, it is just an introduction to the theory. When you actually do it, which I very strongly recommend to those who are aspiring for doctorate, it will be a different learning procedure altogether. So JBI is for the scoping review. So this is basically about systematic review. And when people do systematic review, they sometimes also report the results of meta-analysis. Normally, systematic reviews and meta-analysis are done together. And meta-analysis, by term, you can understand it's a statistical technique or a set of statistical techniques for summarizing the results of several studies. Now, for example, let's say we were studying about coffee consumption and how it relates to the risk of, say, heart disease. Okay, so each single paper that you read will provide you an estimate of the association between coffee consumption and the risk of heart disease by some number. You will take this number from all the research papers that you have studied and then try to combine this number to arrive at a single estimate. And based on that, you will be able to say collectively about the overall evidence about the coffee consumption and the heart disease in a person. So it is a very complex statistical technique, and a series of methods are used in meta-analysis. And again, it's quite complex. Takes around systematic review itself takes around uh, 8 to 10 months to do, and then meta-analysis again takes around 4 or 5 months to do. And you have to really have a very strong hold of statistical knowledge. But even in absence of that, most researchers do not do meta-analysis because you always need some professor's guidance to do it. But nevertheless, it's good to know about what really meta-analysis is. So basically, the number of studies and how we collect studies is basically same with the systematic review. The only difference is that we are attempting to arrive at a single estimate, which we can combine from all the research papers and then try to say something comprehensively about what is happening. So meta-analysis can be done whenever we have more than one study addressing the same issue. And the sort of subjects are addressed in meta-analysis include interventions. So when there are different randomized controlled trials that have been done to check the efficacy of one drug in different populations. And from all these studies, I want to understand the overall efficacy of the drug. So I might go and do meta-analysis of that kind of interventional study. If there are studies which are assessing the relative risk of certain groups of population, then I can do meta-analysis to understand the overall risk. And if I want to understand the diagnostic ability of a particular tool, which gives me sensitivity and specificity and ppv of the diagnosis test, and I want to see how it performs in different populations, then I can also do meta-analysis. And basically, if I just want to understand how the prevalence of a particular disease varies in different populations in different settings, I could go on to do a meta-analysis. So meta-analysis is, again, systematic review will give you theoretical evidence synthesis. When you combine it with some number, then your situation always almost becomes very powerful. Then the evidence is very much reliable. And if you have done it very systematically, and that is why meta-analysis and systematic reviews always have a upper hand when it comes to really saying something about your research area. So tomorrow, if you're writing a research proposal for some funding, and you want to really convince the funders that your research problem is important to solve, then in your literature review you will always be curious to know about whether any systematic reviews or meta-analysis have been done in this area, which could strengthen my ability to seek the funding from the funding body. And meta-analysis is very, very new. It is still growing, and we also are very much new in learning this kind of field, and it is slowly catching up. So generally, when in PhD, at least in UK, if your PhD lasts for 3 years, the first year you will be doing systematic review to understand everything that has been written in your research area. The second year you will be doing a quantitative study. The third will be qualitative study. Using 3 areas of evidence, then I think students are considered to be well informed in their particular field. So meta-analysis use something which is called as forest plot. Forest plot is a graphical representation of results of meta-analysis. So this is a forest plot. Can you see the PPT? This graph?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So in this forest plot, what the authors have done is the meta-analysis of association between migraine and ischemic heart stroke. So it's a ischemic is heart, I think. So it's a heart stroke and the relationship between migraine. And on x-axis, this is the study name. This is the identifier for the study. And different studies found these estimates. So the forest plot shows the estimate and associated interval. So this is the estimate, the circular thing, and these bars tell you the 95% confidence interval for the estimate. And this is called forest plot because the vertical lines are thought to resemble forest. Now, if we look closely, do you see the enlarged version of the plot? Can you see?
Not right now.
Now?
Now, yes.
Yeah, thank you. So now when you see, so they are trying to understand the relationship between migraine and some kind of stroke, okay? So if there is no relationship between migraine and ischemic stroke, then what will be the relative risk? Relative risk is the ratio of two risks.
Ma'am can't understand.
So I'm saying that this kind of forest plot always has a baseline, okay? A baseline which tells you whether the result that was obtained in a research study is actually effective or not. So because this is a log scale and this is relative risk, so when the risk of two outcomes is the same, almost same, when, so for example, if you're testing a drug and the risk of population before getting the drug and after getting the drug is the same, that means relative risk is 1, right? The ratio of the risk is 1. So in this case, log of 1 is 0. So 0 is the baseline case. So imagine a straight horizontal line at 0, and these are all the studies. Okay, so they almost always found some amount of effect or some association between migraine and the stroke. And these dark estimates, as you can see, these are the pooled estimates. So these were all the case control studies. This is also a kind of research design, and this was the pooled estimate that was obtained from all these kind of studies. Then this was the pooled estimate from cohort studies. So these three were the cohort studies in which people were followed for a period of time. And this is the pooled estimate of pooled cohort and pooled case control. So as you can see from the meta-analysis, what we're trying to see is they studied all these individual research papers, arrived at a single estimate, tried to plot on the same scale after some adjustments, of course, and then tried to identify the pooled estimate. The pooled estimate, as you can see, has narrower confidence intervals and is more precise. And similarly, in this. So ultimately, we are trying to understand these pooled estimates. And because this is above the line of 0, that means it is ascertained that there was some kind of association between migraine and the stroke. So this is how the meta-analysis is carried forward. It's a very complex statistical method, and one has to have a very good grasp of fundamentals of statistics and inferential statistics to know about it. But to give a brief overview, next time when you come across something called as forest plot or meta-analysis, uh, understand that this is what has happened in the research paper. So these are few of the observations from the forest plot, as I've already described verbally. So we found that there were 3 pooled estimates, one pooled estimate for all these kind of studies, another pooled estimate for these kinds. So you see the researchers have combined, these were the similar studies. In that they had similar research design. So it gave this pooled estimate. These 3 studies had similar research design. So the authors had this pooled estimate and then an overall pooled estimate for all the studies. The pooled estimate have not narrower confidence intervals than any of the individual studies and therefore are much more precise. And the value for no difference in stroke incidence because migraine suffers not is 0. So this log of 1 is 0, so that is the baseline. So you always compare the pooled estimates with the baseline. So if there was no effect, then this pooled estimate will cross the line of 0. But because they are above, that means there is some association is there. So the pooled estimate is well outside the confidence interval for the pool. I think there should be a baseline estimate, which shows good evidence that migraine is a risk factor for stroke. So this is how after doing, so there would have been some studies which say that migraine is a risk factor for stroke or migraine is not a risk factor for stroke. So some noble researchers set out to really explore what is the overall evidence. And that is why they did a systematic review and then eventually they did a meta-analysis review. And after this, they were able to say with all these kind of studies that there is some good evidence that migraine is a risk factor for stroke. So this is the beauty of doing study of studies or systematic reviews or meta-analysis, and really very time taking, but very intellectually rewarding, and you actually get to know a lot about research methodology when you are doing such kind of work. So I strongly recommend you to do it in your thesis if feasible. So the best way to do systematic review is to do one, but then I will say that start with scoping reviews and then gradually go to systematic reviews. Read the guidelines. So Prisma guidelines remain the same for scoping reviews. And as I've said, you can do in your master's thesis. Let me show you the Prisma diagram. Can you see the document?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so this is something called as the Prisma flow diagram. So it starts with records identified through database searching. So you may have come across some, say for example, 1,000 records. Okay, and then additional records from other sources. So for example, here you came across 500 research papers. So total you had 1500 papers. Now they will have duplicates, obviously, because same papers might be there in some other sources from which you are collecting. So after deduplicating, after removing the paper, perhaps you are left with 800 research papers, and then you screen them. So first level will be title screening. After title screening, you are left with 400 papers, and you exclude 400 research papers. I'm just writing random numbers, but you will be writing as how it happens in your work. Then full text articles assessed for eligibility. This actually prevents one level more screening. There is abstract screening also. So if I combine both abstract screening and uh, title screening, so for example, from 800, then I can say 500 were excluded, and I was left with 300. And then perhaps I am left with 150 research papers after fully reading the 300 papers. And then I understand that these will be the 150 research paper that I will be finally doing my systematic review on. And then from qualitative synthesis, studies included in the qualitative synthesis. Again, from these, I will decide how many research papers I'm going to study based on my problem statement, exclusion criteria, and exclusion criteria. And then finally, I have to tell which of the studies are included in meta-analysis. So meta-analysis, we obviously need studies which have some quantitative aspect to it. Okay, so among them, even though all these studies may be relevant to my work, but not all of them will be tackling the problem in a quantitative manner. So then again, I will synthesize them for meta-analysis. So this is called as the Prisma diagram. This shows at every step how you have arrived at the final research papers for your systematic review. Is that clear? Is the Prisma diagram clear slightly?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let me try to show you how the evidence is synthesized. It's not opening. Any questions so far?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So let me show you the. So this is a scoping review, but I think the observations are the same. So for example, this is the first level search that you do. These are the forums that you identify, and these are retrieved records. So for example, for my particular research, I was able to retrieve 513 records. So these 513 records are actually this, the combination of these two. So total records I found was 500. So this is what it says. And this was the Prisma diagram. So in the Prisma diagram, you have to specify the duplicates that were removed, then after screening title, then abstract screening. And not only saying abstract screening, but you have to actually say that these are the common reasons for excluding the research papers, what was not matching with the inclusion criteria. Then these were the studies for included paper, detailed paper study. Sometimes when you are reading the paper in reference, you will find some relevant paper which was not included in this. So you read them and then include them also for a final study. And then again, you mention the common reasons for excluding. So this is very important. In research, you have to have an answer of why a particular step was performed. In systematic review, you are either including or excluding. And basically, when you are not excluding some paper, you're including it. So the reason to specify inclusion is very, very critical when it comes to systematic reviews. And then again, then you synthesize how the different studies were based on which country and everything. Then it's basically evidence synthesizing. And this is how you explain the results of the systematic review. So this is basically the data extraction form. And these are the authors, the age, the health outcome, the country, and the findings. So this is how a systematic review is uh, presented when you present it in results, and then its results are interpreted. So basically, that is how systematic reviews are conducted, and it is very exciting activity if you have the enthusiasm to delve into deeper. And it's a very, very challenging research designed to do. But I'm sure for those of you who aspire to do research in their lives, it will be very useful to get their hands dirty in the systematic review or the scoping review. But start with the scoping review, I would say, and then gradually build up to systematic review or meta-analysis. So that was from my end. I try to explain to you in brief about these alternative kind of research designs. The others we have already studied: experimental, qualitative, and randomized control trials and all these. But these are the relatively new kind of research designs, and they are very incipient, still developing, but extremely, extremely powerful to direct the evidence in a particular field. Any questions?
Ma'am, how to generate forest plot, like any software tool?
Yeah, I think there are softwares in which so forest plot is basically you have to first arrive at a estimate for each of the findings, and then you just provide that in a vector form, and I think the software can generate the forest plot for you. I've not created one myself, but I think there will be some functionality in Python or R.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Any other question?
The findings from this reviews can be quite different sometimes than how they bring on same paper, like maybe what we call, say someone is saying there is a correlation of 60% evidence suggesting this happens, but some say it's insignificant. So there
Yeah.
is some marker attached to it, and there is some fuzzy, like not a perfect value.
So
Then
that's a very good question. So when people or when researchers collate the research evidence, obviously you will always find studies that support the hypothesis, that do not support the hypothesis, and those which are very neutral. So you always come across three kind of studies in which you found a risk factor is actually a risk factor, the other in which risk factor is not a risk factor, in fact it is reducing the risk, and third where it is neutral. So then looking at the context, the sample size, and how they are measuring the risk becomes very important to really understand why we observed what it was observed.
okay, ma'am.
So that all is specified when you are summarizing the results. You actually say that 50 research studies were identified, of which 30 supported the hypothesis. In the rest 15, we could not find any evidence, and the other 5 were neutral. That means there was no association found. So it happens. And when it happens, you have to then go to the sample, the population, and the context, and the way it was done. So basically, methodology. That is where methodology becomes very important when you want to understand why the researchers observed those kind of results. And then perhaps it's easier to understand.
Okay, ma'am.
But if the majority of studies are saying that there is a risk factor, then sometimes researchers do go by that the majority evidence wins. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Hmm. Any other question? So how many of you will do scoping review on your master thesis?
Ma'am, I would like to, but it looks quite difficult also.
Huh?
Ma'am, I would like to, but it looks quite difficult also.
So start with scoping review, okay? And it becomes easy with time. Just a second, a call is coming. Hello? Hello? Yeah, so it looks challenging, but if you do it with someone who has some amount of experience, he or she can guide you to it. Start with scoping review.
Yes, ma'am.
I expect at least 2-3 students doing scoping review in their MTech thesis. You can do, you did it on pneumonia detection, no? So you can try to